Now it's time to introduce Kokalitcheva. She is a senior reporter at Axios covering tech, Silicon Valley, and venture capital. She will moderate a panel discussion on the next billion-dollar visual technology and AI investment opportunities. Thank you all for being here, and Kia, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with a group of fantastic investors. We're going to be talking about where the next billion-dollar visual technology and AI investment opportunities are. So since we're going to start off with some introductions, since I'm already speaking, I'll just do myself really quickly. My name is Kokalitcheva. I'm a senior reporter at Axios. I'm based out in San Francisco. And I cover a lot of things, but mainly venture capital. So I'm always very excited to talk to really smart VCs, and they teach me a lot. So let's take it to our panelist who wants to introduce themselves and then also mention what type of visual technologies you've been focused on or investing in most recently. Maryanna, want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, all. I'm Maryanna Saenko, co-founder and partner at Future Ventures. We're an early stage deep tech firm. Delighted to be here today and with such a brilliant panel. We focused on, similar to, I know, Lindy and Kiersten, early stage deep tech across a huge swath and variety. So everything from nuclear fusion to immunology to women's health and fertility. And I think where vision is increasingly playing an important role is just in improving the depth and coherence and data density that's available for people to make kind of consistent computational decisions on. And so we're seeing that play into every space of investment.
Awesome. Lindy?
Okay. Hi, I'm Lindy Fishburne, co-founder and managing partner at Breakout Ventures. Excited to be here today. And the three women you have together know one another and look at lots of similar spaces. We invest early stage, what we think of as the intersection of technology, biology, and chemistry, and really, hopefully phenomenal founders that are leveraging the tech stack of the last 20 years that's typically been built and paid for outside of biology and chemistry and is now being leveraged in these fields. We look for opportunities. Typically, I would say we're going down the path of life sciences or human health, and also sustainability, since so many of the tools and technologies are the same. When we think about vision and visualization right now, so far for us, specifically in a couple of portfolio companies, I would say it's been in cell analysis and down to single cell analysis at amazing throughput that's allowing us to know things that humans were going to get to on their own. So we have use in diagnostics and use in cell therapies that are pretty exciting. And then today we could talk about, I think, what the world's going to look like kind of post-visualization.
Kiersten?
Hi, yeah, Kiersten Stead. So I'm a co-founder and managing partner of DCVC Bio. So we focus and have been for a long time on deep tech or computational engineering-based applications in the life science. And for us, that means human therapeutics, agriculture, industrial biotech specifically. And then we're sort of siblings to DCVC, which does the whole gamut of other things: nuclear fusion, rocket ships, quantum, et cetera, et cetera. So we focus on early stage. So we do some company founding, mostly seed and Series A across those verticals. Like the other panelists have already commented, the real advances in visualization are being able to elucidate things that we previously couldn't visualize, right? We tend to think about, certain EM measurements as being visual elucidation, but there's other ways to measure things. And of course, that then generates empirical data sets that can be used to create value in generating the end product or the article of commerce, which is generally for us a drug, an agricultural product, or whatnot. So I'd say that being able to close the loop and not just relying on what we have been able to empirically measure in broadly applied academic research, or research that's done at large companies, but be able to generate proprietary data sets around figuring out ways how to better see things that we want to see, whether that's, atom movement in cells, electron cloud movement, whether all of those things, be able to visualize them, measure them, and then apply them.
Awesome. Well, to get started, let's talk about today and what's exciting and happening and actually working today. I'd love to hear about some of the types of technologies that probably were getting developed for a long time, but finally today are, investable. You're seeing companies that are using them in real ways, and you're putting your money into it. Anyone, feel free to jump in.
I'm happy to give an anecdote down that path. We have a portfolio company that to me kind of embodies this opportunity. It's a sepsis diagnostic called Cytovale, but they're leveraging computer vision from the automotive industry to analyze videos of cells that are being pushed and squeezed at very high throughput, and basically being able to measure cell mechanomics. So the deformability of a cell. And with the magic of AI and computation, you're able to do that at a very quick pace. And from that video on the microfluidic chip, make a diagnostic determination in 7 minutes. That's a radically different world than when you were waiting days for a particular bacteria to grow to then tell you what you were dealing with. And so that ability to pull some of these visualization technologies from other industries and for us apply them to cells at very high throughput and glean data that you didn't even know existed before, right? We didn't know that cell deformability changes before or earlier on in a disease state. So I think that's been exciting for us. We have another company, Cellchorus, that again is taking videos and able to analyze single cells and predict survival, impact, how useful they are, should they be developed in a cell therapy, how does it match the patient? So that ability to do single cell analysis, leveraging visualization and computation is just radically different than where we've been able to work before. And ideally, if we're doing those things earlier in the pipeline in therapeutics development, it should be benefiting us when we think about downstream of the pipeline, so that we're investing the bigger, more expensive dollars in this case, the cell therapy or the cell types that have the highest likelihood of success. So the ability to use our dollars and our time more rationally to get to end therapeutics that we all understand the value of and are excited about, I think is an exciting place of where we are today.
Yeah, I have an adjacent anecdote to that, which is we're investors in a company called Pumpkin Seed, which was grew out of Jennifer Dion's lab at Stanford, and I'd probably been looking in the silicon photonics space for years before finding the right investment. But there was essentially a thesis, which is if you could match computational capability with better silicon photonics, you could start being able to actually see and visualize what's inside your samples, whether they be biologics or anything else you're looking at. So the capacity to actually sort and screen down to all of your metabolomics, all of your proteomics, basically like your multi-omic data set, which today the large pharma companies that are trying to make decisions, they have a small subset or a best guess at actually what the chemical constituency is. I think the natural evolution of this is starting to understand things like, how does catalysis actually work, right? We have a really good theoretical model of how catalysts work, but we haven't actually been able to visualize them. And so I'm really excited about a future where the advancement of these technologies actually start being able to marry the theoretical understanding we have of a space with an actual physical and visual representation, such that we have more complete models.
Right. So I was trying to think of a different kind of example. Because of course we have many, but one really interesting example is so we have a company, Totus, that is involved in generating covalent drugs. And so what this means is that most of the drugs that we take have a sort of on-off kinetics to them, right? So they interact with each other through loose hydrogen bonding or whatnot. But there are drugs that were developed historically that we didn't know were covalent. I mean, they bind permanently to those substrates, like aspirin, for example, is a covalent binder that we realized over a period of time were in fact safe and were quite efficacious. And so the problem is, how do you find, without skipping over some of the molecular biology here, how do you find target or pieces inside targets you'd like to develop drugs to that you can develop covalent binders? So Tota's using synthetic biology, protein engineering, and protein evolution, designed a fluorescence system that could take a whole bunch of chemistry and then put in basically probes into that and convert all of those non-covalent binders into covalent binders to be able to find these reactive hotspots where you could create covalent drugs. And so they're able to do that now. They're able to see that, right? It brings to light something you couldn't visualize or measure easily into a way that you can see and visualize, quantify, because you can do this at scale. And so from that, now they have a number of drugs, and they're already drugging patients in a phase 1/2 at the moment for a target called PI3 kinase alpha. So just a really nice, tidy example of how making things more visible using a whole, confluence of technologies is allowing us to really go a lot faster and be more accurate with our research efforts.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'll just add to these comments is that, this works across the plethora of scales. So we're talking about the, micro scale, but on a macro scale, you're seeing such a surge, for example, in agriculture companies. We have one, Verdant Robotics, but there's quite a few that are able to do real-time visual sensing of plant health to make decisions like weeding, spraying, pollinating, and so I think the marriage between visualization, understanding what's in the photo or video, and action is kind of like the next natural evolution of naturally robotics, but generally like working and interfacing, moving away from like a 2D interface with computation to an actual like mobile autonomous interface.
Really curious to hear how you guys think about the application of technologies. I think, Lindy, you mentioned earlier that were developed by folks in a particular industry, but really can be applied to other sectors, other applications. How are you guys thinking about where to look for that, or where to find the founders that maybe are really thinking outside the box? And are you looking for companies that are already doing these applications or building these applications, or what's your approach?
I think one of the pieces that we're most excited about and have been kind of cheering for in the last 10 years as this space has been developing is what we talk about as this democratization of science. So as biology becomes more data, as chemistry becomes more data, and it becomes engineerable and programmable and predictable and all these things we're talking about, it means a whole new set of people can come to the table and interact. So you're no longer in, just the hollowed halls of academia. And so we see more multidisciplinary teams coming together that are as strong at the beginning on the biology, the science side, and the computation or technology scale side. And that is super exciting. And also, I would say, definitely a growing trend and different than the companies that we were seeing emerging 10 years ago. And so I think they're starting in a more, whether it's AI technology native way than they were 5-10 years ago. And so we're looking for those multidisciplinary teams that have their eye on the prize of what they're trying to solve and why that's important and a big market and critical, but what's the most rational way to get there? And that can be leveraging technology that they don't need to develop. And that's pretty exciting. So we have a bunch of companies that are leveraging sensors to, I would say, kind of move past the visualization phase. And are we going to look back and think, part of this visualization was for us humans, because that was the only way that we could understand something was by seeing it and then trying to draw data from there. But from a computation perspective, I think we're probably looking at opportunities where you don't even need the visualization, and it's going to work the other way, and they can just pull the data out.
Kiersten?
I don't have it. The short answer is, you need, I'll just use therapeutics development as an example. But of course, there's good examples in agriculture as well. You need a multidisciplinary team that understands both. It is, the great training ground for building therapeutics is actually the therapeutics industry. And it's very, very challenging. It's very rare for a technical founder who's not developed a drug, or not, or a technical founder who is a robotics engineer, say in the example of Verdant that we share an investment with Maryanna. That founding team had both deep agricultural expertise and robotics and automation expertise. And you sort of need both. You need a native understanding of those two things, we believe, for highest success. The other flip side is also true. It's really challenging to take, a founding team of pharmaceutical executives and think that they're going to develop their own AI algorithms, right? They'll, of course, the bar is always coming up on computational biology and people they can hire and the analysis of data, but that's not sort of what the ethos we're looking for. We're looking for native speakers of the languages in which they have to speak, that they can take drug development or agricultural development the full way without buying into sort of mythology of those industries, like really knowing how it's done behind the scenes.
Maryanna, anything to add, or?
I mean, Brilliant Women covered everything,
Really curious to hear if you guys are thinking about a future in which these technologies will be kind of off the shelf, right? Like maybe you won't need that CTO who is like the world's foremost expert in a particular tech, so that they can really build that backbone and apply it to a new industry. Is that coming? Are we going to get a lot more sort of self-serve, off-the-shelf technologies that just creative founders can apply to different things?
I think that, continually happens. And once something becomes, off the shelf, the value then goes up the stack, right? So once something becomes rapidly commodified, then the value is on top of that, built on top of that. And so it does two things. It raises the bar for everyone else, and they'll pay a greater penalty for not coming up the stack. But of course, it then forces all of us to think about what's next and where the value is, the proprietary value that it can be created on top of that.
Yeah, I fully agree with Kiersten on this. My sense is that there's obviously a democratization of tool sets happening, and you can see that with foundation models. The flip side is to truly do justice to proprietary data today, you probably still need an excellent team to hand roll a model for you to some extent. And the question is like, how quickly and in what areas do you transition those things? And when I think about visualization technologies, it's like the comment that was made here earlier, right? They're like, I think it was Lindy, you were saying that it's kind of for the humans, right? If you think about it as an input-output technology, just an information flow, humans are really good at assessing visual information data on average. Not everyone. Some people are auditory learners, but most people are visual learners. And so I think what we're going to shift is outputs from these models such that you need less of a highly specific skill set, but possibly one that's very tightly attuned to the space where you're trying to make some novel, uncharacteristically better step change in the space that you're operating in. So I think there's always going to be a space for expertise. And if you get to a place that the technology is so democratized that anyone can use it or do something interesting with it, then you end up kind of potentially in an interesting world, but more in like a TikTok creator world where like suddenly everyone can make a video, but the relative value of each individual one is not that interesting for that long.
Yeah, I'll add just like we've lived through and all, seen and benefited from in most cases, and the software revolution, it basically built the tools and the groundwork for an entirely new type of company to be built, and you didn't have to be able to do every single part on your own. So you were able to start ahead and move faster. I think that we're fundamentally seeing against biology and what we think of as this biology revolution. But in order to capture value and actually bring, go from bits to atoms that come back and benefit us in the real world, we see real value in companies and teams that are building proprietary data. So data that they're generating, that they understand the quality of, that they have, that maybe nobody else has. And how do you leverage that proprietary data potentially against models and tools that you haven't had to build all of those from scratch? And that's the point of leverage. But that proprietary data allows you to build potentially new business models in biotech, as we think about these companies having a tech platform on that data that pharma and other folks want access to, but that they're also able to develop their own pipeline. And we fundamentally know, we've been saying that with the advent of AI and all the efficiency that it brings, we certainly know that in therapeutics is a place that you will still get paid or potentially overpaid to leverage AI and getting there faster and more efficiently. And so we think proprietary data is like a key element to that versus this like race to the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Let's skip to the future a little bit. Let's say 5 years from now, what do you think you're going to be investing in? What do you think is kind of currently percolating and will be, ready for investment prime time in about 5 years?
It's easier to make 50-year assumptions than 5 years, right? There's natural trends, like we probably won't be burning dead dinosaur bones to continue fueling our data centers kind of thing. But 5 years is tougher because there's so much more variability that is often irrational, frankly. And so my sense is that in 5 years, a lot of the platform technologies that are just coming to fruition today will start being more widely adopted, whether it's, some of the single cell technology that people were talking about here, or maybe cell-free DNA and these kinds of things, like finally see their day in the light. And so my intuition is that as those get more widely spread, you'll end up in kind of like the next iteration of, if today we're investing in this kind of like next generation of like CRISPR-like technology platforms, the next iteration of companies that are then going to be using it for the most kind of highly leveraged and valuable use cases. And so my sense is across the board is that we'll keep trending from this broad horizontal platforms towards more and more specific vertical uses that have larger and larger appeal.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a really strong trend now to using a confluence of different technologies to be able to create totally new modalities of both crop protection and drugs. So, right now our commercial modalities in the life sciences are constricted to sort of small molecules, antibodies, some peptides, and now cell therapies, right? Cell and gene therapies. And that's just going to, I think, explode as we get more and more of these alternative combination modalities, like synthetic proteins, synthetic peptides, using all sorts of stability mechanisms and delivery. I think that we're at a really interesting inflection where that is all getting proven out at early stages of the clinic now and in animal models. And we're going to see that become more widely accepted in the next 5 years. We'll see, I think, approvals of these completely synthetic modalities.
I'll add, I think we're excited about how these tools and technologies that are leveraging biology are starting to be used outside of the traditional markets and the traditional end markets where you expect to see them. So I think you'll start to talk about bio-enabled companies outside of life sciences, outside of human health, whether that's more in materials, whether that's in biodefense. I think that you will see biology permeate far beyond the places that we all typically expect to be playing and designing and scaling biology. And so I think that's exciting.
So it sounds like a lot of the tech right now that, is good tech, strong tech that's interesting. You guys are all predicting that the application is going to be much wider in 5 years of what you're seeing at like just purely incredibly smart folks developing it right now. Is that interesting to either one of you to invest in, or is that just not the type of businesses you want to place your bets in?
Well, I think you have to be careful when you start thinking about that you're solving a problem that's real. I mean, we certainly see that where, you can get a sort of clever overkill where you have an interesting technology you want to drag into another, but you're not solving a real pain point in that new industry. I think that's the biggest sort of sandpit we see people step into. And that's why, I think we talked about before, you need people that really deeply understand the industry they're in, because you have to generate something of value. So yes, we do, but we also see a lot of missteps as that expands over different applications.
Well said.
Yeah, I think exactly. The applications have to be sufficiently large that they're truly world changing, right? You end up, there's an interesting thing you can almost think of as biotech as kind of like the inverse of ag tech, where in biotech, in pharma, the size of a problem in the sense that you roughly know how many people have a disease and how large the market is and how expensive it is and how challenging it is to live with that disease. But then it's hard to actually go and develop modalities that, really are curative against it. Versus in agriculture, you have the flip side. You can do all the plant editing you want on Earth to some extent, but you don't really know what's going to be truly necessary in the market. Right? We're limited by our creativity. And so I think the application entirely has to be matched to a market and a need and a use case that is not like, oh, this would be nice to have, but if this works and it exists, then everybody switches to that new modality because there is no other path forward. And frankly, in a world where we're facing such catastrophic outcomes from climate change, this is going to become an existential problem. So I actually think that when we talk about these application areas, particularly in the climate sector, they become everyone's problem.
Normally uncertainty is not super fun, but in a way, when it comes to climate, is that almost like an incentive because you sort of know that technically planet Earth is the TAM. So it almost doesn't matter where exactly it'll fall.
I think that's right. The challenge is that right now in the climate space, and I'd love to hear Lindy and Kiersten's perspective on this, but there's a kind of a game of hot potato. It's like our collective grandchildren's problem to deal with, but who's going to actually take on the burden of onus and ownership today, right? And you can look at this from everything from iron nodules on the seabed mining. We should probably figure out how to get those off the desert barren areas on the seabed rather than clear cutting rainforest in Indonesia. But there's a lot of money made in clear cutting rainforest in Indonesia. And this is it's horrific to think about, but how do you shift the economics such that you don't end up with people inadvertently bearing the brunt of the burden when they can't afford to do so? And this is the real challenge.
Yeah, I'd agree. The real challenge is, and I'll add to Maryanna said, is timing, which is basically what she's saying, right? Is, timing, and then that's further complicated by institutions making laws or pushing their own companies, or actually, the generation of stronger institutions in the developing world. And these are things that VCs cannot control and founders cannot control. And so the bets have to be matched with what are the institutions going to change laws to push or incentivize different behaviors? And when is your target audience going to really feel the pinch and need to make a changeover? So those are really, really big complications in the climate world.
I think it's all about alignment of incentives. That's how the world works, no matter how we feel about things. And so I think my optimistic take would be, with the leverage from the tools and technology that we're talking about, and entrepreneurs focused on solving a problem, a market dislocation, an unmet need, that they've got a better shot now at doing it in a way that is cost competitive or at cost parity, which can align incentives a lot faster. I think we are not investing behind opportunities where you really have to count on a green premium to get something to happen, to get someone to do something. So I think our best bet and our optimistic hope is that with tools and technology leverage, we can do things at scale that can be cost competitive or even more cost effective. And then that inherently drives change because you've got your incentives aligned. I think the pay more to do the right thing is a pretty tough sell. And you haven't seen that scale to actually solve a problem or address a need in a market.
Time to time travel again. We're going to go into the 10 to 20 year horizon. And I know that VCs and entrepreneurs love to dream about the future. That's very far away. What are you guys predicting will be not only investment opportunities, but really like technologies that will actually bear to fruition? Are we going to have flying cars in, 20 years? You don't have to address that one, but yeah. What is
Maryanna might have one of those.
I think my horse will grow wings first. I mean, look, I used to work for Airbus and I have a great love for aviation, so I'm not against. Well, I strongly dislike the idea of car with flying, because like, why would you, just like too many complicated systems together. But yeah, small electric aircraft, sure. Well, I am a big supporter of thinking about greater electrification and broadly cleaning up our grid, but also novel modalities of energy production. So we will know in the next decade if things like small fission reactors, from a regulatory standpoint, they work from a technical standpoint, it's a regulation issue. Fusion reactors from a physics standpoint, right? If we actually start bringing on cheap, clean energy onto the grid at a level matching and exceeding renewables, then you end up in a really interesting world, because then you end up in a world where it's not just a game of who has access to the largest amount of petrochemicals to burn. And I think that's probably the biggest shift that I see coming, is a fundamental global geopolitical shift in energy, power, and resources as a result of greater novel energy systems.
Yeah, and so I think you're asking a couple, a few investors on their view here, and we're investors because we invest in the world we want to live in. So you're getting a bit of strong bias there. But I agree. I think nuclear energy in all forms has to be on the table. We're just not serious about climate if we're not considering that. And that will shift things away from, back into the hands of technologists who have the institutions again to be able to institute novel types of electrification. On the therapeutic side, I think the general trend and what I want to see is, the new therapies that are that have been invented and been approved in the last 5 years become frontline, right, instead of last resorts. And in order to do that, we need changes in how insurance functions, right, in the US, especially, not so much in capitalized or the captive healthcare systems, but in the US most certainly, because the incentives aren't aligned in the insurance world. That's going to be a big challenge for us to overcome. And in agriculture, we're not running out of farms or food, we're running out of farmers. And so that's, we're all seeing a big trend towards automation, robotics, and, stop treating ourselves like robots and allowing us to do the kind of work that we already know farmers are tending towards. Sorry, but that was a lot fast. Go for it, Lindy.
Okay, I like the world that these two are building, so I hope to live there also. And I hope that we look back and think that the fact that we relied on animal models and animal testing to develop therapeutics to be effective in humans will be seen as like the dark ages, and that we will look back and be very surprised that that's what we relied on for as long as we have. So we're not there yet, but that's an area, and trying to understand what are the steps that we're going to have to take to replace that approach. I think everything from the visualization to the computation and the tools we've been talking about today puts that within reach. So hopefully it's not 50 years out, but that's a future that we're trying to build.
Awesome. We have 1 minute left, so I'm going to need you guys to give me a very, very short answer. But I love to ask VCs that. Name one thing in visual or AI tech that you want to call BS on.
That the capital flowing into building these models today unequivocally equals value.
That AI will give you drugs, that there's a black box that'll make faster drugs.
I think it's what we said before, that the pictures are the answer. I think we need to move post-picture pretty quickly.
Love it. Well, thank you three so much. This was such a great conversation.
Thank you for having us.